That summer in Brooklyn changed everything. The summer of 1999, when the heat rose from the cracked sidewalks and dreams still felt possible for two teenagers who had nothing but each other. Clara Bennett was 17 years old, with auburn hair that caught the sunlight and eyes the color of honey. She lived in a small apartment above her mother's failing bakery on Flatbush Avenue, where the scent of fresh bread mingled with the sounds of a neighborhood struggling to survive. Her father had left when she was 9, leaving behind unpaid bills and a mother who worked 18-hour days just to keep the lights on. Across the street, in the basement apartment of a crumbling brownstone, lived Marco Ferrante. He was 18, with dark, curly hair, olive skin, and hands that were already calloused from working 3 jobs. His mother had passed away 2 years earlier, leaving him alone with a father who drowned his grief in whiskey and anger. Marco wore the same 2 shirts to school, walked 3 miles each way because he couldn't afford the subway, and still managed to smile whenever he saw Clara. They had known each other since childhood, but that summer was different. That summer, everything shifted. It started on a Tuesday evening in July. Clara was closing the bakery alone because her mother had collapsed from exhaustion and needed rest. The register was empty, the shelves were bare, and she was crying silently behind the counter when the bell above the door chimed. Marco stood there, still in his uniform from the grocery store where he stocked shelves until midnight. He didn't say anything at first. He just walked over, sat down on the floor beside her, and let her cry on his shoulder until the tears ran dry. "We're going to lose everything," she whispered. "The bank is taking the building. Mom doesn't know yet, but I saw the letter." Marco took her hand in his. His palm was rough, but his touch was gentle. "Then we'll figure something out. Together." "How? You have nothing. I have nothing. What can we possibly do?" He looked at her then, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. It wasn't pity. It wasn't false hope. It was something deeper, something that burned with quiet certainty. "I'm going to make something of myself, Clara. I don't know how yet, but I swear to you I will. And when I do, I'm going to come back for you. I'm going to marry you. I'm going to give you everything you deserve." She laughed through her tears. "That's a big promise for a boy who can't afford new shoes." "I mean it." He squeezed her hand. "Every word. Will you wait for me?" Clara looked into his dark eyes, at this boy who had nothing but gave her everything he had, and she nodded. "I'll wait." That night, they sat on the fire escape outside her apartment, watching the city lights flicker against the summer sky. Marco told her about his dreams, about wanting to build something real, something that would last. Clara told him about her fears, about watching her mother fade a little more each day, about feeling trapped in a life that seemed to have no exit. When the clock struck midnight, Marco kissed her forehead and made his promise again. "5 years," he said. "Give me 5 years. I'll come back, and everything will be different. But life rarely follows the plans we make." 3 weeks later, Marco disappeared. Clara went to his apartment and found it empty. His father was gone too, along with everything they owned. The neighbors whispered about debts, about dangerous men who had come looking for payment, about a car that had arrived in the middle of the night. She searched for him. She asked everyone she knew. She even went to the police, but they had no answers. Marco Ferrante had vanished from Brooklyn as if he had never existed. The first year was the hardest. Clara kept the bakery alive through sheer determination, working alongside her mother until her hands cracked and her back ached. She wrote letters to Marco, with no address to send them, filling notebooks with words he would never read. She kept his photograph under her pillow and his promise in her heart. The second year, her mother's health declined. Medical bills piled up like autumn leaves, and Clara took a second job cleaning offices at night. She stopped writing letters but didn't stop hoping. By the third year, hope had faded to a dull ache. She met other men, went on occasional dates, but no one compared to the boy who had held her hand on the bakery floor and sworn to return. The fourth year brought her mother's passing. Clara buried her on a rainy October morning, standing alone at the graveside, wondering if Marco even knew, wondering if he was even alive. By the 5th year, she had rebuilt what she could. The bakery was hers now, small but surviving. She had learned to live with the hollow space inside her chest, the place where his promise still echoed. She told herself that first love was always intense, always impossible. She told herself to move on. But she never did. 23 years passed. Clara was now 40 years old, with threads of silver in her auburn hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of laughter and loss in equal measure. The bakery had grown into a modest success, a neighborhood institution where regulars came for her mother's recipes and stayed for Clara's warmth. She had never married, though not for lack of opportunity. Something always held her back, a voice in her heart that whispered, "Wait," even when waiting seemed foolish. Her life was quiet, routine, predictable. She opened the bakery at 5 every morning, closed at 7 every evening, and spent her nights reading or walking through the neighborhood that had changed so much since her childhood. The brownstones were renovated now, filled with young professionals who paid more for coffee than her family had spent on groceries. The old Brooklyn was disappearing, but Clara remained, a bridge between what was and what had become. It was a Thursday in November when everything changed. The afternoon rush had ended, and Clara was wiping down tables when a black car pulled up outside. Not just any car, but a vehicle that seemed to absorb light, sleek and expensive, in a way that didn't belong on her street. 2 men in dark suits stepped out first, scanning the area with practiced eyes. Then the rear door opened. The man who emerged was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was dark with distinguished traces of grey at the temples, his face weathered by time and something harder. But his eyes, when they met hers through the window, were unmistakable. Dark. Deep. Burning with that same quiet certainty she had seen 23 years ago on a bakery floor. Clara's hands began to tremble. The cloth she was holding fell to the table. He walked through the door, and the bell chimed exactly as it had that summer night in 1999. The 2 men in suits remained outside, standing guard like statues. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Clara gripped the edge of a table to steady herself, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This couldn't be real. This had to be a dream, a hallucination, some cruel trick of memory and longing. Clara. His voice was deeper now, roughened by years and experiences she couldn't imagine. But underneath it all, she could still hear the boy who had promised her everything. Marco. The name came out as a whisper, a prayer, a question she had stopped asking years ago. He nodded slowly, and something in his expression cracked. The powerful, controlled man in the expensive suit suddenly looked vulnerable, uncertain, like a boy standing in a bakery doorway with nothing to offer but his word. "I came back," he said. "I know it took longer than 5 years. I know I have no right to be here. But I made you a promise, and I intend to keep it." Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't move to wipe them. 23 years of waiting, of wondering, of that hollow ache in her chest, all of it crashed over her in a wave she couldn't control. "Where were you?" her voice broke. "I looked for you. I waited. I thought you were gone forever." Marco took a step closer, then stopped, as if afraid to presume too much. "It's a long story, longer than I can tell you standing here. But the short version is that my father's debts caught up with us. Men came for him, and I had a choice: let them hurt him or go with them and work off what he owed." "Work off? What does that mean?" His jaw tightened. "It means I spent 10 years doing things I'm not proud of, learning skills that no one should have to learn, building a reputation in a world that doesn't forgive weakness." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "I became someone else, Clara. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. But through all of it, I never forgot you. I never stopped planning to come back." Clara's mind was spinning. The black car, the men in suits, the way he carried himself like a man accustomed to command. Pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture she wasn't sure she wanted to see clearly. "Who are you now, Marco? What did you become?" He was silent for a moment, weighing his words. "I run an organization, a large one. We operate in areas that exist in the grey spaces of the law. Some would call me a crime boss. Others call me a businessman who handles problems that legitimate businesses can't touch." He met her gaze directly. "I won't lie to you, Clara. I've done hard things, made hard choices, but I never lost sight of who I wanted to be when I finally came home." Clara should have been afraid. She should have told him to leave, to take his black car and his suited guards and disappear back into whatever shadow world he had emerged from. But looking at him now, seeing the boy she had loved beneath the armor of the man he had become, she felt something she hadn't felt in 23 years, hope. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back after all this time?" Marco reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing a ring that caught the afternoon light, simple but elegant, a diamond set in white gold. "Because I finally have something to offer you. Because I finally have the power to protect you, to give you the life I promised. And because not a single day has passed in 23 years when I didn't think about you, wonder. About you, dream about coming back to this bakery and finding you still here." He knelt on the worn wooden floor, right where he had sat beside her all those years ago when she was crying about losing everything. "I know I have no right to ask. I know I disappeared without a word. But I'm asking anyway, Clara Bennett. Will you give me a chance to keep my promise? Will you let me show you that some things are worth waiting for?" Clara looked down at him, this man who had once been a poor boy with nothing but his word, now kneeling before her as one of the most powerful men in the city. Her heart was racing, her thoughts tangled, her entire world shifting beneath her feet. She should say no. Logic, caution, self-preservation, all of it screamed at her to refuse. But Clara had spent 23 years listening to logic, and all it had given her was an empty apartment and a heart that had never healed. "Stand up, Marco," she said softly. He rose, uncertainty flickering across his face. Clara stepped closer, close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw, the lines etched by years of burden and responsibility. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. "I have questions," she said. "So many questions, and I'm not saying yes to anything yet, but I've waited 23 years for you to walk back through that door. The least I can do is hear your story." Something in Marco's expression shifted, relief and gratitude mixing with something deeper. He covered her hand with his own, pressing her palm against his cheek. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance. I'll tell you everything, Clara. Every dark corner, every hard choice. And if you decide I'm not the man you want, I'll walk away and never bother you again. But if you decide I'm worth the risk..." He paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Then I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for lost time." Clara felt her heart crack open, spilling out. Emotions she had buried so deep she had forgotten they existed. This was madness. This was impossible. This was the most terrifying and exhilarating moment of her life. "Come upstairs," she said. "I'll make coffee, and you'll tell me everything." Check if you're already subscribed to this channel. Stories like this about promises kept across decades and love that survives the impossible only happen when people like you support what we create. Subscribe now so you never miss the next chapter. Clara's apartment above the bakery had changed little since Marco had last seen it, though everything felt smaller now, compressed by time and memory. The same worn couch sat beneath the window. The same photographs lined the walls, including one of her mother that made his chest tighten with old grief. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon, a scent that transported him instantly back to being 18 years old and desperately in love. She made coffee in silence while he sat at the small table, his large frame somehow out of place in this modest space. The suited men waited in the car below, a fact that felt absurd and necessary in equal measure. This was Clara's world, small and honest and real. His world was something else entirely. When she finally sat across from him, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, she looked at him with those honey-colored eyes and said simply, Start from the beginning. So he did. My father owed money to the Castellano family, Marco began. More than I knew. He had been gambling, borrowing, making promises he couldn't keep for years. By the time they came to collect, the debt was over $200,000. They gave him a choice: pay in full within 48 hours, or lose everything, including me. Clara's face paled. They threatened to hurt you? Worse. They saw potential in me. Young, strong, angry at the world. They offered my father a deal. The debt would be forgiven if I came to work for them. Not as an employee, as property. Until I had earned back what he owed, I belonged to them. And your father agreed to this? Marco's expression hardened. He didn't hesitate. Signed me over like I was a used car and disappeared that same night. I haven't seen him since. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. Clara reached across the table and touched his hand, a gesture so natural it seemed to bypass all the years between them. What did they make you do? At first, simple things. Running, messages, standing guard at doors, intimidating people who owed money. He paused, gathering himself. But I was good at it, Clara. That was the problem. I was smart, I was careful, and I didn't scare easily. Within 2 years, they moved me up. Within 5, I was running my own crew. Within 10, I had paid off my father's debt 100 times over, but by then, leaving wasn't really an option. Why not? Marco looked at her directly. Because I knew too much, seen too much, done too much. Men, in my position, don't retire to a quiet life in the suburbs. They either keep climbing or they disappear permanently. He took a breath. So I kept climbing. I built alliances, eliminated rivals, made myself so valuable and so dangerous that no one could touch me. Eventually, the Castellano family fell apart from internal fighting, and I stepped into the vacuum. Now I run everything they used to control, plus territories they never even dreamed of. Clara was silent for a long moment, processing. When you say eliminated rivals, what exactly do you mean? I mean what you think I mean. His voice was flat, unapologetic. I've never harmed an innocent person, Clara. That's a line I drew early and never crossed. But the men who threatened me, who tried to take what I built, who hurt people under my protection, he shook his head. They made their choices. I made mine. And you're telling me this because you think I'll understand, or because you think I'll forgive you? I'm telling you because you asked for the truth. This is who I am now. I'm not asking you to forgive anything. I'm just asking you to see me clearly before you decide whether there's anything left worth saving. Clara stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street where the black car waited. 2 more vehicles had joined it, she noticed, positioned at either end of the block. Protection or surveillance, she couldn't tell. I spent 23 years building a life without you, she said, quietly. Learning to be okay on my own, learning to stop waiting for someone who might never come back. And now you show up in an expensive suit with armed guards, telling me you're some kind of crime lord who wants to keep a promise from when we were teenagers. She turned to face him. Do you have any idea how insane that sounds? Marco rose from the table and crossed to her, stopping just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. It sounds insane, because it is insane. Nothing about my life makes sense, Clara. Nothing except you. Except the memory of sitting on that bakery floor and holding your hand and knowing, with absolute certainty, that you were the only good thing I would ever have. You don't know me anymore. I'm not the same girl you left behind. No, you're stronger than she was, wiser, more beautiful. His hand came up to brush a strand of silver hair from her face. And you're still wearing that same look in your eyes, the one that tells me, you're scared, but you're not going to run. Clara felt her resolve wavering. Everything about this situation screamed danger, complication, 1,000 reasons to walk away. But underneath all of that was something she couldn't deny, the feeling of recognition, of coming home to a person rather than a place. If I agree to give you a chance, she said slowly, what exactly does that look like? I'm not moving into some fortress. I'm not leaving my bakery. I'm not becoming some mob wife who looks the other way while you do whatever you do. I would never ask you to be anything other than who you are. Marco's voice was firm. Your life stays your life. The bakery, your apartment, your independence, all I want is the chance to be part of it, to see you, to talk to you, to prove that the boy you loved is still inside this man. And the danger, the enemies you mentioned. What happens when they find out about me? Marco's expression shifted, becoming something harder, more protective. They already know. I've had people watching this neighborhood for the past 6 months, making sure you were safe, while I planned the right way to approach you. Anyone who threatens you threatens me, and everyone in my world understands what happens to people who threaten me. You've been watching me for 6 months, not watching you, watching out for you. There's a difference. Clara shook her head, somewhere between touched and disturbed. This is a lot to process, Marco. More than I can handle in one conversation. I know. Take all the time you need. He stepped back, giving her space. I'm staying in the city indefinitely. When you're ready to talk again, or ask more questions, or tell me to leave you alone forever, you know how to reach me. He pulled a card from his jacket and set it on the windowsill, plain white, with just a phone number embossed in black. That number reaches me directly, day or night, for anything. Clara picked up the card, turning it over in her hands. You really think we can just pick up where we left off? After everything? Marco moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. I'm not naive enough to think we can erase 23 years, but I'm hopeful enough to believe we can build something new, something better. He opened the door. Goodbye, Clara. For now. She listened to his footsteps descend the stairs, then watched from the window as he emerged onto the street, spoke briefly to his men, and disappeared into the black car. Within moments the convoy was gone, and the street looked exactly as it had before he arrived, except nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. Clara sat down heavily on the couch, the card still clutched in her hand. Her mind was racing, replaying every word he had said, every confession, every promise. The logical part of her brain was screaming caution, warning her about the dangers of getting involved with a man like Marco had become. But another part, the part that had kept his photograph under her pillow for 5 years and his promise in her heart for 23, was already reaching for her phone. She didn't call that night, or the next. She spent 3 days wrestling with herself, going through the motions at the bakery while her thoughts circled endlessly around the same questions. What did she want? What was she willing to risk? Could she really trust a man who had disappeared once and might disappear again? On the 4th day, something happened that changed everything. Clara was locking up the bakery when she noticed a car parked across the street, not a black luxury vehicle, but an ordinary sedan with 2 men inside who weren't particularly trying to hide their surveillance. They weren't Marco's people, she could tell that much. Marco's men were professionals, invisible when they wanted to be. These men were watching her openly, almost tauntingly. She went upstairs and called the number on the card. Marco answered on the first ring. Clara? There are men outside my building, in a grey sedan. They've been there for 2 hours. She heard him speak to someone else, his voice sharp and commanding. Then he was back on the line. Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm sending people now. Who are they? I don't know yet, but I will. Don't go near the windows. The call ended. Clara stood in the center of her apartment, heart pounding, suddenly acutely aware of how vulnerable her quiet life really was. Within 10 minutes, she heard car doors slamming outside. Voices. Then silence. 20 minutes later, Marco himself was at her door. They're gone, he said as she let him in. Taken somewhere quiet for a conversation about who sent them and what they wanted. And? Early to say, but I have suspicions. His jaw was tight, his whole body radiating tension. There are people who don't like that I've come back to Brooklyn. People who want to know why and who you are to me. Clara sank onto the couch. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I've been invisible my whole life, Marco. Nobody knew I existed. Now I have strangers watching my door. Marco sat beside her, close but not touching. I know, and I'm sorry. Bringing you into my world means bringing my problems too. I should have found a way to keep you separate, but the moment I walked into your bakery, the calculation changed. Now everyone knows you matter to me, and that makes you valuable. And a target. So, what do we do? I can't live like this, looking over my shoulder every time I leave the house. You won't have to. His voice was firm. I'm going to fix this. But it means escalating some things I was hoping to avoid, making some moves I was saving for later. He looked at her directly. It means fully committing to the path I'm on, no more half measures. And what does that mean for me? It means you'll have protection, real protection. People I trust watching over you at all times. It means I'll be more visible in your life, which will make you a harder target but also a clearer one. He paused. And it means you need to decide, sooner rather than later, whether you're willing to take this journey with me. Because if you're not, if you want out, I need to know now so I can make different arrangements. Distance myself in ways that keep you safer. Clara looked at him, at this man who had complicated her entire existence in the space of a few days, and realized she had already made her decision. Maybe she had. Made it 23 years ago, sitting on a bakery floor at midnight. I'm not going anywhere, she said, but I need you to understand something. I'm not going to sit in a tower waiting to be rescued. If I'm part of this, I'm part of it. You tell me what's happening. You include me in decisions that affect my life. You treat me like a partner, not a possession. Something flickered in Marco's eyes, surprise and admiration mingling together. You have my word. Good. Clara stood up. Now, are you hungry? Because I've been stress baking all day and someone needs to eat these scones before they go stale. Despite everything, Marco laughed. It was the first time she had heard that sound in over 2 decades, and it cracked something open inside her chest. The boy she had loved was still in there, buried beneath layers of necessity and survival, and she was going to find him if it took her another 23 years. The weeks that followed were a careful dance between Clara's ordinary life and Marco's extraordinary one. True to his word, he assigned protection, but they were ghosts, people she rarely saw but always sensed, maintaining distance while keeping her within reach. The grey sedan never returned, neither did any other obvious threat. Marco began appearing at the bakery almost daily, arriving in the late afternoon when the rush had faded and Clara had time to talk. He would sit at the small table by the window, drinking coffee she made just for him, and they would fill in the gaps of 23 years. She told him about her mother's final days, about the struggle to keep the bakery afloat, about the handful of relationships she had attempted and abandoned. He told her about the education he had received in the underworld, the economics of power, the price of every decision he had ever made. Their conversations were careful at first, circling around the deeper currents that ran between them. But as the days passed, something shifted. The circling became approaching. The caution became curiosity, and the distance between them began to close in ways neither had planned. It happened on a Saturday evening, 3 weeks after Marco's return. Clara had closed the bakery early, and they were sitting on her couch, a bottle of wine open between them, when the conversation turned to their shared past. "Do you remember the fire escape?" Clara asked. "The night you made your promise?" Marco nodded slowly. "I remember everything about that night. The way the city looked from up there, the sound of your voice when you said you'd wait, the smell of your shampoo when I kissed your forehead." He smiled, a rare, unguarded expression. "Lavender. You always smelled like lavender." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "I still use the same shampoo. Habit, I guess." "Not habit, continuity." He turned to face her more fully. "That's what I noticed first when I walked into the bakery. Underneath the bread and the coffee there was lavender, and suddenly I was 18 again, sitting on a fire escape, terrified and hopeful in equal measure." "You were terrified that night?" "Completely. I had no idea how I was going to keep my promise. No money, no connections, no plan. Just absolute certainty that I had to find a way, because losing you wasn't something I could survive." Clara set down her wineglass. "And now, Are you still terrified? More than ever. His voice was quiet. Because now I have things to lose. Power, territory, wealth. But none of that compares to the terror of sitting here, hoping you'll look at me and see someone worth loving instead of a man shaped by violence. Clara reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. I see both. The boy who made me a promise, and the man who kept it. The one who protects me and the one who has done things I might never fully understand. She squeezed his hand. But I also see someone who came back, who could have built an empire anywhere in the world but chose to come home. That means something, Marco. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so tender it made her breath catch. What do you want, Clara? Right now, in this moment, what do you want? She didn't hesitate. I want to stop being careful. I want to stop circling around what we both feel. I want to know what it's like to be with you, not the ghost of who you used to be, but the man you are now. Marco held her gaze for a long moment, 1,000 emotions crossing his face. Then he leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her. It was nothing like their teenage kisses, those brief, nervous touches that had seemed monumental at the time. This was deeper, more deliberate, carrying the weight of decades of longing. Clara felt herself dissolving into it, all her questions and fears fading into the simple reality of his presence. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathless, Marco rested his forehead against hers. I've imagined this moment so many times, he said, but imagination doesn't come close to the real thing. Clara smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. Then stop imagining and start living. We've wasted enough time. That night, they talked until dawn, lying side by side on her narrow bed, trading secrets and stories in the darkness. There was nothing more than talking and holding each other, but it was enough. More than enough. It was the foundation of something new being built on the ruins, of something old. In the days that followed, their relationship deepened in ways Clara hadn't expected. Marco began including her in pieces of his world, not the dangerous parts, but the human ones. She met people who worked for him and discovered they were not the faceless criminals she had imagined, but real people with families and loyalties and complex motivations. She learned that Marco's organization funded schools, helped families in financial crisis, and protected neighborhoods that the police had long since abandoned. It's more complicated than the movies make it seem, Marco explained one evening. We're not saints. We operate outside the law, and that means making compromises that decent people wouldn't make. But within our world, there are rules. Honor, loyalty, protection of the innocent. I've built something that's about more than money or power. It's about order, safety, a system that works when the legitimate systems fail. Clara listened, trying to reconcile this complex reality with her assumptions. And the enemies you mentioned? The men who sent that car to watch me? Marco's expression darkened. The Rossetti family. They controlled this territory before the Castellanos, and they've never forgiven being pushed out. Now that I'm back in Brooklyn, they see an opportunity. They think I'm distracted, vulnerable. His jaw tightened. They're about to learn how wrong they are. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. But Clara, I need you to understand something. He took her hands in his. There may come a time when things get dangerous, when people around me get hurt. I will do everything in my power to protect you, but I can't promise that my world won't touch yours in ways you didn't expect. Clara looked at him steadily. I've spent my whole life being safe, Marco. Safe and alone. Maybe it's time to be brave instead. Stop reading for a moment. If this story is touching your heart, I need you to leave a comment right now. Write this simple phrase in the comments: love can cross any distance, any time. This line captures exactly what Clara and Marco are proving to us, that real love doesn't give up, doesn't forget, doesn't let go. Leave this comment now and let me know you believe in that kind of love. The danger Marco had warned about arrived on a cold December evening, just when Clara was beginning to believe that perhaps they could have something like a normal life together. She was closing the bakery when 3 men walked through the door. They didn't look like customers. They moved with purpose, spreading out to block the exit while the one in front, a thin man with cruel eyes and an expensive coat, approached the counter. "Miss Bennett," he said, and her name on his lips felt like a violation. "I have a message for your friend Marco. He's going to want to hear it in person, so you're going to come with us." Clara's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to stay calm. Marco had prepared her for this possibility, had taught her what to do, what to say, how to buy time. "I don't think so," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Whatever message you have, you can deliver it yourself." The man smiled, thin and cold. That wasn't a request. He reached for her arm, and in that moment, the back door of the bakery burst open. 3 of Marco's men came through like shadows, moving with terrifying efficiency. Within seconds, the 3 intruders were on the ground, restrained and silent. One of Marco's men, a quiet, stone-faced man named Victor, who had become something like her personal guardian, approached Clara. "Are you hurt?" "No. They didn't touch me." "Good. Mr. Ferranti is on his way. He'll want to speak to these gentlemen himself." Clara watched as the intruders were dragged out through the back door, their protests muffled by the hands covering their mouths. She should have been shocked, frightened, appalled. Instead, she felt something unexpected. Protected. The system Marco had described was working exactly as intended. 20 minutes later, Marco arrived. He came through the back, avoiding the street, and the moment he saw her, something in his controlled expression cracked. "Clara." He crossed to her in 3 quick strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heart pounding against her cheek. "I heard what happened. I came as fast as I could. I'm okay. Really." She pulled back enough to look at his face. "Your people got here in time. They were incredible. They should never have been needed." His voice was hard, furious. "Rossetti crossed a line sending men after you. This isn't how things are done. There are rules, and he broke them." "What does that mean? What happens now?" Marco's jaw tightened. "It means I stop trying to find a peaceful solution. It means I stop hoping they'll see reason. It means I do what I should have done months ago and end this permanently." "Marco, wait." Clara grabbed his arm. "Before you make any decisions, I need to understand something. What does end this permanently mean? Are you talking about people getting hurt?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing his words. "I'm talking about removing a threat, neutralizing leadership, making it clear that attacking what's mine comes at a price no one wants to pay. Killing people. You're talking about killing people. I'm talking about protecting you, protecting everything we're trying to build." His voice was quiet but unwavering. "I told you from the beginning who I am, what I've done, what I'm capable of. This is what that looks like, Clara. This is the reality of my world." Clara stepped back, needing space to think. Part of her wanted to condemn him, to draw a moral line she wouldn't cross. But another part, the part that had felt relief when his men had restrained those strangers, the part that had spent weeks learning about the good his organization did, wasn't sure it was that simple. "Is there another way?" she asked. "Any other way that doesn't involve more violence?" Marco sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Rossetti doesn't respond to diplomacy. He sees it as weakness. The only language he understands is strength. If I don't respond decisively to what happened tonight, he'll interpret it as an invitation to do more, to escalate, to come after you again when my people aren't quite fast enough. And if you do respond, what then? Then it ends. His organization falls apart, his allies scatter, and anyone else who might have thought about threatening you sees what happens and decides against it." Clara closed her eyes, wrestling with her conscience. She had known this moment would come eventually. Known that being with Marco meant making peace with parts of his life that ordinary ethics couldn't accommodate. The question was whether she could accept that reality, or whether it would destroy everything between them. "Do what you have to do," she finally said. "But Marco, I'm asking you to be careful, to only do what's necessary, To not let revenge make you into someone you don't want to be. He stepped closer, taking her face in his hands. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it for you, for us, for the future I promised you 23 years ago. He kissed her forehead, just as he had done on that fire escape in another lifetime. I love you, Clara. I've loved you since I was 18 years old, and I will do whatever it takes to give you the life you deserve. The next few days were tense, charged with anticipation Clara didn't entirely understand. Marco was absent more than usual, appearing at the bakery only briefly before disappearing into the night with his men. Victor remained her constant shadow, along with additional security she rarely saw but always sensed. Then, on the fourth night, Marco came to her apartment late. He looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, but there was something resolved in his expression. It's over, he said. Rossetti is done. His organization is finished. Clara searched his face. Are you okay? I will be. He sat down heavily on the couch. It wasn't pretty, Clara. I won't pretend otherwise, but it's done now. You're safe. We're safe. She sat beside him, taking his hand. Did anyone get hurt? Some of their people who chose to fight, none of mine, and no innocent bystanders. He looked at her directly. I kept my word, only what was necessary. Clara felt a complex mixture of relief and discomfort, awareness that her safety had been purchased at a price she would never fully comprehend. But she also felt something else. Gratitude. This man had walked through darkness for her, had done terrible things because he loved her. The least she could do was meet him where he stood. Come here, she said, and pulled him into her arms. He resisted for just a moment, then collapsed against her, letting her hold him as the tension drained from his body. They stayed that way. For a long time, two people who had found each other across impossible distances, sheltering together against a world that would never understand. Winter deepened, and with Rossetti's threat eliminated, something shifted in the atmosphere surrounding Clara and Marco's relationship. The constant tension that had defined their early weeks together faded into something calmer, more sustainable. For the first time, they could imagine a future that extended beyond immediate survival. Marco began the process of restructuring his organization, moving resources away from the more volatile operations and toward legitimate businesses. It would take years, he explained, to fully transition, but the goal was clear: to build something that didn't require constant warfare to maintain. I want to leave something behind that's clean, he told Clara one evening as they walked through Prospect Park, guards trailing at a discreet distance. Something that could exist in the light instead of the shadows. Something our children could be part of without shame. Clara's heart stuttered. Our children. Marco stopped walking and turned to face her. I told you I came back to keep a promise. The promise wasn't just about the ring, Clara. It was about everything, a life together, a family, growing old in a house with a garden instead of a fortress. He searched her face. Is that something you still want, after everything you've seen? Clara thought about her apartment above the bakery, the quiet, routine that had defined her existence for so many years. She thought about her mother, who had worked herself to death trying to hold on to something small and decent. She thought about the girl she had been at 17, sitting on a fire escape and believing that love could conquer anything. I want it, she said. I want all of it. But I need to know you're serious about this transition. I need to know this isn't just a dream you're selling me. It's not a dream. It's a plan. Marco pulled out his phone and showed her a file of documents. Properties I'm acquiring for legitimate development, businesses I'm investing in, legal counsel I'm retaining to help navigate the transition. I've been working on this for 2 years, Clara, since I first decided to come back. I knew I couldn't offer you a life in the darkness, so I started building a way out. Clara scrolled through the documents, seeing the scope of what he had been planning. Commercial real estate, restaurant groups, import-export businesses with proper licensing, a foundation for community development. He hadn't just been dreaming about change, he had been engineering it. This is real, she said, looking up at him. As real as I can make it. It won't be fast and it won't be easy. There will be complications, people who don't want me to leave, situations I'll still have to handle in old ways. But the direction is set. Every day, a little more light, a little less shadow. Clara handed back the phone and took his hands in hers. Then I'm in. Completely. Marco smiled, and for a moment he looked almost young again, like the boy who had promised her the world with nothing but his word. I was hoping you'd say that, because there's something I need to ask you. He reached into his coat and pulled out the same velvet box she had seen in the bakery weeks ago. This time, when he opened it, she was ready. Clara Bennett. I've loved you since I was 18 years old. I've spent 23 years trying to become someone worthy of you. I'm not there yet, and maybe I never will be, but I'm asking anyway. He knelt on the cold path, heedless of the frozen ground. Will you marry me? Clara felt tears streaming down her face, the same tears she had cried that first day when he walked back into her life. But these were different. These were tears of joy, of completion, of a circle finally closing. Yes, she said. Yes, Marco. I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit, perfectly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Then he stood and kissed her, long and deep, there in the winter park, with the city sprawling around them. When they finally broke apart, both of them laughing and crying at once, Marco cupped her face in his hands. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this worth it, he said. Every day, I'm going to give you a reason to be glad you said yes. You already have, Clara whispered. You came back. That's all the reason I'll ever need. They walked home together, hand in hand, and for the first time in her life, Clara didn't feel like she was waiting for something. She had arrived. The wedding took place in early spring, in a small ceremony at a historic church in Brooklyn Heights. Clara wore a simple white dress that her mother would have loved, and Marco wore a suit that probably cost more than her bakery made in a month. Neither of them cared about the expense or the formality. What mattered was the promise they made. To each other, the promise they had been making and keeping for 23 years. The guest list was small but meaningful, a handful of Clara's friends from the neighborhood, key members of Marco's organization who had proven their loyalty. Victor, who had become almost like family during those tense early months, and standing in the front row, a photograph of Clara's mother, propped on a chair so she could witness her daughter's happiness from wherever she was. When the officiant pronounced, "Them husband and wife," Marco kissed Clara with the same tenderness he had shown that first night in her apartment, and the small crowd erupted in cheers. The reception was held at a restaurant Marco had recently acquired, a beautiful Italian place in Red Hook, with exposed brick and candlelight. There was food and wine and music, and Clara danced with her new husband, as if they were the only two people in the room. Late in the evening, as the celebration wound down, Marco led Clara outside to a small courtyard where a fountain whispered in the darkness. I have something to show you, he said. A wedding present. He handed her a folder. Inside were photographs and documents for a property in Connecticut, a restored farmhouse on several acres of land, far enough from the city to feel like another world. Our home, Marco said, away from the business, away from the noise, a place where we can build the life I promised you. Clara looked at the photographs, at the white house with green shutters, the sprawling garden, the trees that would shade them in summer and blaze with color in fall. She imagined waking up there, making breakfast in a kitchen filled with sunlight, growing old with the man who had crossed continents of time and circumstance to find her again. It's perfect, she said. It's everything. Then it's yours. Ours. He pulled her close. I told you I would give you everything you deserve. This is just the beginning. 5 years passed like a dream and a reality, intertwined. Clara and Marco lived between two worlds, splitting their time between the Connecticut farmhouse and an apartment in Brooklyn near the bakery. The bakery itself had expanded, now occupying the entire ground floor of the building and employing a small staff who had become extended family. Clara still baked the bread herself every morning, refusing to let success change the fundamentals of who she was. Marco's transition continued, slower than hoped, but steadier than feared. The legitimate businesses grew, The shadow operations shrank and gradually the balance shifted. He wasn't out entirely, probably never would be, but he was no longer in the darkness either. He existed in the grey space between, managing both worlds with the same careful intelligence that had kept him alive for decades. Their first child, a daughter named Elena after Marco's mother, was born in the second year of their marriage. She had her father's dark hair and her mother's honey-colored eyes, and, from the moment she arrived, she became the center of their universe. A son, Anthony, followed 2 years later, named for no one in particular because Marco wanted him to make his own name, his own legacy. Raising children in their circumstances required careful navigation. The children knew their father was important, that men in suits sometimes came to the house for meetings, that there were things they weren't supposed to ask about. But they also knew their father made pancakes every Sunday, read them stories every night, and would destroy anyone who threatened their happiness. The balance, imperfect as it was, worked. Clara found happiness she hadn't known was possible, not the fairy tale happiness of perfect circumstances, but the real happiness of building something meaningful with someone she loved. There were hard conversations, compromises, moments when Marco's old life intruded in ways that frightened her. But there was also laughter, partnership, the deep satisfaction of promises kept and time reclaimed. One autumn evening, when Eleanor was 5 and Anthony was 3, Clara sat on the porch of the farmhouse watching the sun set behind the trees. Marco joined her, handing her a cup of tea before settling into the chair beside hers. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That summer in Brooklyn," she said, "when we were teenagers, when you made me a promise. A promise I took entirely too long to keep. A promise you kept anyway." She looked at him, at this man, who had once been a poor boy with nothing but his word, now her husband, the father of her children, her partner in everything. "I used to wonder what my life would have been like if you'd never come back, if you'd stayed gone, or if I'd said no when you showed up at the bakery. And now I don't wonder anymore, because this is the only life that matters, the one we built together." Marco reached over and took her hand, the same gesture of comfort and connection that had started everything on a bakery floor in 1999. "I meant what I said that night, Clara. Every word. I just didn't know it would take 23 years and a journey through the underworld to get here. Was it worth it? Everything you went through?" He was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. "I wouldn't wish my path on anyone, but if I had to walk it again to end up right here, in this moment, with you beside me and our children sleeping upstairs." He squeezed her hand. "I would walk it 1,000 times. Clara felt her eyes fill with tears, the same tears that seemed to come so easily around him, tears that were somehow always joyful, even when they hurt. "I love you, Marco Ferrante. I love you, Clara Ferrante." He smiled at her new name, still savoring it after 5 years. "Thank you for waiting. Thank you for believing. Thank you for giving a poor boy with nothing but his word the chance to become someone worthy of you." "You were always worthy," she said. "I was just waiting for you to figure it out." They sat together as the sun disappeared behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. In the house behind them, their children were dreaming. In the world beyond the farmhouse gates, complications waited. But here, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. A poor boy had promised to marry her. 23 years later, he had returned and kept that promise. And now, as the stars began to appear in the Connecticut sky, Clara finally understood that some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with something better. They end with forever together. If you have watched this far, it is because you felt something. This story of Clara and Marco, of promises kept across decades, of love that survives the impossible, only exists because people like you believe in it. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. If not, now is the moment. Subscribe, because this is where you will find stories that touch your heart, that remind you that real love never gives up, never forgets, never lets go. Subscribe and become part of a community that believes in second chances, in destiny, in the power of promises kept. Leave a comment right now saying, "I have watched this far." I want to see your comment. I want to know who you are, who stuck with Clara and Marco until the very end. Your comment tells me that these stories matter, that the hours spent crafting them reach someone who truly cares. And before you go, leave a like. That simple click tells the universe that love stories like this one deserve to be shared. It helps other people find their way here, to this channel, to these stories that might change how they see the world. Finally, share this video with someone who needs to believe in love again. Someone going through a hard time. Someone who has been waiting for something. Someone for a long time. Share it and remind them that patience is not weakness, that waiting can be worthwhile, that the best things in life sometimes take decades to arrive. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. Until the next story.